A very good evening and welcome to another episode of South Africa Today and Beyond. This evening I'm joined by the first consular of the Sahrawi Republic, Ebrahim Ahmed. Welcome to the show, Elmami.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this program. And also I want to greet your audience by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Which means peace be with you, and that's what we hope all of you.
Malaikum salam, and thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Comrade Elmami, I think that maybe let's talk about the fact that, Western Sahara is the last colony on the African continent under Moroccan occupation. Maybe give us a historical perspective into the struggle for your people in Western Sahara for their right to self-determination, for freedom, for justice and equality.
Mm-hmm. Western Sahara, for those who are not aware about the history of that African country, was a colony of Spain, as many other African countries were French or English or Portuguese colonies. Then in 1975, Spain had obligation to decolonize the territory, but did not fulfill its obligation, then signed an agreement with Morocco and Mauritania, those neighbors from the south and the north of the territory, to divide the territory and to occupy it by force. Then as a result of that agreement and that military invasion, thousands of Sahrawi they moved as refugees to the neighbors country of Algeria. When they lived for over those 40 years in the refugee camps, and at the same time the Sahrawi people start the liberation struggle against the occupation of Morocco and Mauritania since 1970-75. That military war finished or stopped in the 1991 when the United Nations signed another agreement with Morocco and Polisario Front. Polisario Front is the liberation movement of the Sahrawi, to celebrate a referendum for Sahrawis to choose what they want to be, a free state, or to be part of Morocco, or to choose another way to. But unfortunately, Morocco did not accept the referendum, and because only a single reason, because they are very convinced that the Sahrawis only want to be independent country. Until 1991. That peace process signed under the auspice of the United Nations between Morocco and the Polisario, Morocco started to put many obstacles in that process. Sometime the last one, in the last year in March, they expelled the civil staff of the United Nations in the territory. They in July, they broke the ceasefire by moving many troops out of the position, that initial position in the territory, and now there is a risk to come back again to the confrontation, to the military confrontation. This is in resume what happened from 1975 until now. But the question of the Western Sahara is a legal issue, because as a non-autonomous territory is recognized the self-determination for the people of Western Sahara, as mandated by the United Nations Resolution 1415, and there is also a resolution from the International Court of Justice that said there is no any links of sovereignty between Western Sahara and Morocco. So the Sahrawi people, they have the right of self-determination to be exercised.
Mami, I mean, you're talking about some of these international structures like the UN and so on. And I know Western Sahara is fully recognized by the African Union. And some 32 odd years ago, Morocco withdrew itself from the AU because of the positions taken up by the AU. But of course, we're seeing now a bid by Morocco to want to come back onto the AU. What kind of impact does that kind of conversation or that move have on the struggle itself?
Morocco left the African Unity Organization in 1984 because the African organization accepted the Sahrawi Republic as a member state. Then Morocco left the organization, and they stay 32 years out of any African bodies like African Union, Pan-African Parliament, or any other organization that links with the African Union. Now, after all this time, they now want to be again a member. Initially, there is no problem for Morocco to come to be a member of the African Union, because Morocco, we recognize that Morocco is an African country. But what we are now calling on is if Morocco want to come to join the African Union again, but without any condition, because they now try to convince other African countries. You can see this week the King of Morocco is visiting many African countries to get support for them to join the African Union, but also to expel the Sahrawi Republic from the African Union. And Morocco is not allowed by the African rules, the African Charter that said there is no country can we expel from the organization. Then they try now to get support from the African Union, many other countries in the African Union, to expel the Sahrawi Republic from the African Union. That's what we don't accept.
Comrade Elmami, the other issue is the issue of natural resources and the issue of minerals, which has made the situation worse in terms of the conflict itself. Can you explain maybe to our viewers in terms of the presence of minerals, the rich minerals in Western Sahara, and how this has potentially been used as a tool of exploitation and also made the situation worse in that area?
The Western Sahara is a rich country and with a small population. That, I think, is the reason behind the invasion of Morocco to the Western Sahara. Western Sahara is one of the most important bank of fish, and also there is minerals like oil, gas, phosphate is one of the largest producer of phosphates. And now Morocco, after the occupation of the territory, they used those resources to legitimate the occupation of Morocco of Western Sahara. They signed many agreements with big companies from the West. And also they signed one of the most important agreements of fish with the European Union. Then the most important things that people has to know is the illegality of those agreements, because are using those resources when Morocco have no sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Now there is appeal now in the European Court that we're waiting for the resolution, and the General Advocate of the African Union of the European Union, in his statements to the court, he said there is no sovereignty between Morocco over the Western Sahara. Then any economic or business activity that is happening in Western Sahara with another foreign interest is illegal. And also there is in 2002 a legal opinion issued by the legal advisor of the United Nations, a Swedish advocate, when he said it's illegal any exploitation of the mineral resources in Western Sahara signed by Morocco, because the people of West Sahara is not benefiting of that, because there is a foreign power in Western Sahara is illegal. Then no one can use those natural resources.
Comrade Elmami, as we draw to a close, maybe in conclusion, what forms of solidarity, can we pledge practically to the peoples of Western Sahara?
The right of self-determination of the Sahrawi people, I think it's had many supporters over the world. There is a big solidarity movement, for example, in Europe. There is a political and strong political position in many African countries, like, for example, in SADC, when the Sahrawi people, we have 5 embassies. But the most important is that solidarity that we can came from the ground, from the people.
Absolutely.
And anyone can be welcome to join this movement. Just with denounce any human rights violation in Western Sahara, or just to join any campaign to show the situation of Western Sahara. We invite them to be part, for example, of the campaign against the exploitation of natural resources. We invite people to come to be a member of the South African Movement of Solidarity. And just when you share with your friends in the school, in the university, in your village about the issue of Western Sahara, that is the last colony in Africa, and unfortunately is an African country occupied by another African country in this 21st century. Is not acceptable. It's
absolutely unacceptable. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And I think important lessons to learn, I think, from today is that, I mean, the rich history of international solidarity among African countries, and it's worse when you have one African country occupying another African country. Thank you so much, Comrade Elmami, for joining us on the show.
Thank you for you.
Thank you so much for watching. And after the ad break, we're going to be talking to Botshelo, who's been to Western Sahara, a film director and a storyteller. So stay tuned. Welcome back from the ad break, and in studio now I'm joined by Botshelo Matuba, who is a film producer, a storyteller, but also a director. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Botshelo, and I know you've been to Western Sahara a couple of times in your life, and it's part of the work that you do, film directing, producing, but also telling these stories. Maybe take us through the reason why you went to Western Sahara and some of the experiences that you had there in Western Sahara in the refugee camps.
I traveled to Western Sahara first time back in 2011. We studied international relations and humanities at university, and we've always had a strong theoretical understanding of what's happening in the place. But it was very important for us to also travel there and actually be on the ground and understand it from a personal perspective. Myself and my partners, Mbuso Ndlovu and Lebogang Rastaba, traveled to Algiers, where we were hosted by our South African embassy, and then into Tindouf and into the refugee camps. The background was that it was the Fi Sahara of that year, which is the International Film Festival. And a whole bunch of international filmmakers, producers, artists, humanitarians converge within the refugee camps and tell their stories. We were very fortunate to stay with families as well, so you actually live the exact same way that they live. We eat the food because it's part of our solidarity towards our comrades in Western Sahara. And fortunately, because we were hosted by our embassy, we had access to their government. We conducted interviews with the Ministry of Police, understood the information blockade coming out from the Moroccans, which is why a lot of people don't even know about this country called Western Sahara. From a female perspective, I engaged a lot with the women in the clinics because they suffer difficult female diseases. There's also a lot of termination of pregnancy. Sanitation, of course, is an issue because it is desert, so water is very scarce. And we just went there to see and view, shot some footage, and we are still in the process of post-production. So it was an amazing experience.
I'm hoping that we can get to see some of the work that you produced. I really want to see this.
There is a trailer that we'll be able to share, but we are also in the final stages because as time goes by, we just start getting more and more content out of it. And
I can imagine.
We just want to keep telling the story as it develops. The second time I traveled was in 2013. I was actually pregnant at the time. And I wanted to understand how the females there actually live under those conditions. But we survived and we were graciously hosted as well.
Now tell me, I mean, you must have interfaced with a lot of organizations, but I mean, the issue of women keep coming a lot, I mean, in the conversation. Tell us about some of the ways in which the women organize themselves, but I mean, in different sectors in Western Sahara.
At the time, the Minister of Arts and Culture was the late president's wife. So there's a huge contingency of such organizations that come together and build health and sanitation facilities that engage from a workshop point of view where we discuss certain issues such as like the children, because children there are sitting around doing nothing. There is schooling, of course, but on a day-to-day basis, there's very little activity. So the biggest time or the most important time when when people and organizations converge is through this platform of the International Film Festival. A lot of Europeans, Africans, just a lot of countries that come in solidarity to join and understand their issues a bit better.
I mean, a lot of times we want to view, you know, people from Western Sahara, but also in cases, people living under an occupation, people like the people of Palestine, for example. But a lot of times when you talk about people, like, we don't talk about them as victims. We talk about them as survivors. And I can hear that coming out from the conversation that we're having, that, you know, they're gracious people, you know, and loving people, warm people, and comrades. And this means a lot. I mean, when you talk about comradely fashion, we talk about people that are survivors. And what are some of the elements that you saw come out? What are some of the human stories that you interfaced with?
We had such beautiful interactions. First of all, you live in their homes, and they're very willing with the little that they have. The head of the homes are run. The camps are generally run by females because the men are in the army. So it's a big amount of women around there, and they'll always give you a piece of cloth to wear on a daily basis. Beautiful materials, henna, make you tea throughout the day. As you know, in those regions, tea is a big thing. And show you around. Even if it's siesta time, they'll sit with you and tell you stories. Particularly in Western Sahara and Algeria, they are very much aware of our own struggle as South Africans and relay a lot of stories about it as well. Some of the women have been in these camps since 1975, so they understand, you know, the types of issues that we faced, and the rhetoric and the narrative then becomes, how do we also become free without necessarily having to go through terrible acts of war? How do we communicate? How did South Africa get to this point, and what can we do to help? The one thing, though, is that they are not necessarily saying to us, we need solutions from you. They are very willing to actually come up with their own solutions as a country. They just want the assistance and the continued solidarity. So when it comes to issues of sanitation, the one granny was like, whenever you go and buy your products, just buy an extra pack and send it. You know, just keep the engagement going, because you do have a youth that's becoming very restless as well. And anything can infiltrate that mindset too.
And in terms of the kind of resistance movements that we're seeing, and you're correct about, you know, young people taking the forefront in terms of, I mean, shaping the future that they want. I mean, if you look at the demographics of the African continent, a lot of, over 60% are young people on the African continent. And of course, this would include Western Sahara. What forms of resistance are we seeing? And besides the fact that you're saying, you know, you've got men on the front lines that are in the war situation, interfacing with the war, what forms of resistance are we seeing? But also, I mean, you talked about the blockade, the information blockade, which also might make it a bit difficult to organize, I mean, through popular means such as social media. What forms of resistance are we seeing coming out from that area, from people in Western Sahara?
There's a huge, there's a big youth movement. We were also fortunate to interview one of the heads of the youth movements there, who relayed how people are feeling. I mean, you have people that are born in these camps, and fortunately there is access to the outside world through social media. I mean, there is internet in the camps. These young people are English teachers and on social media, so they're very much aware of what's happening outside of their own particular space. They also have the Polisario movement, which is very similar to what we would refer to as our Mgonto Wesizwe movement. Obviously more from a military perspective, but a lot of young people who are joining that movement so that they don't become, you know, confused by other movements that may come and try to take advantage of their restlessness or lack of opportunity that they see in the outside world. So for me, I think the youth movement that we engaged with at that time was one of the strongest ones there, and people who we actually still in touch with to this day.
And I mean, Botshelo, as a storyteller, what do you think that we can do? And also as an activist as well, you know, what more can be done in terms of actively pledging solidarity? I mean, it's one thing, I mean, of course, these things are important, you know, to always continue, have the conversations, the seminars, to educate, raise awareness, but also, you know, conscientize people. But beyond that, practically, what can we do to lend solidarity with the people of Western Sahara?
In my opinion, I believe traveling to the region is one of the most important things we can do. As people that have possibly gained a certain amount of freedom, to gather some brigades that and take young leaders, future leaders of our countries, to actually go and travel, engage with them on a personal level. We use film as an outlet to try and tell these relevant stories, because upon coming back and talking to people about this, another conversation that came up was, what other occupied territories are there in the world that nobody knows about? So we just need to keep that conversation going, but I think the interaction must be on a personal level. We need to find the funding, we need to build the resources to travel there as often as possible. And like I said earlier, I think the film festival is one of the better ways to engage at an initial point. And from there, just continue to go, because it's not necessarily this glamorous thing that you need to go and do and say, I lived in a refugee camp. Sure. It's a continuous movement to continue to go, bring some people here at times that would also like to engage us, host them in our communities, and see a way forward, especially amongst us as the younger people.
And Botshelo, I mean, in terms of those who are sitting at home and watching the show and say, but this film festival that Botshelo keeps making reference to, and I know you're quite passionate about the film festival, and you've been there twice, but in terms of those who are sitting at home within the creatives industry and are saying, but maybe it's an opportunity for us to also go see, and maybe we can become the storytellers of the people of Western Sahara. When does the film festival take place? And I mean, how can people get involved if they do want to get involved in the film festival?
The film festival happens annually. Depends. Sometimes there are adverse weather conditions. It's generally between the months of May to October. This year was in October, but previous years has happened in May. It is a very, very warm and hot climate. I mean, you're sitting with 50 degrees Celsius weather in the morning. So they also have to manage that appropriately. I think the best way would be to contact your embassies. From a South African perspective, our arts and culture are very strong in attending the festivals, and obviously our international relations and cooperation departments as a first point of contact.
Sure.
Other than that, keeping in touch with people like yourselves or myself to just understand when the festivals are happening. And like I said, we are hosted very, very well when we are there, from our own governments to their governments as well. We have a very strong relationship with Algeria, which then leads the way to access Western Sahara.
Sure. Thank you so much, Botshelo, for that information. And I hope that once your documentary is complete, you can give us here at ITV an opportunity to also share it with our viewers at home. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have for you this evening. Thank you so much for watching the show, and have a good evening.